A federal judge has greenlit a class action lawsuit by 3 Uber drivers. The case could affect up to 160,000 Uber drivers in California who could sue for up to $51 billion. The foundation of the case is also the foundation of the sharing economy. They're suing to be retroactively reclassified as employees of Uber rather than independent contractors. Doug McMillan is a tech reporter for the Wall Street Journal and joins us to talk about it. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Thanks for coming on. Now, on what basis has the judge granted this suit? I mean, driving for Uber has costs and benefits that everybody knows. The cost is that you're on your own. You don't get health insurance and all the things that you get when you're an employee of a company. And the benefits are also well known. You get extreme work time flexibility. You can work whenever you want. And these employees who would potentially be part of this lawsuit have presumably weighed the options. They've chosen to drive for Uber. They've enjoyed the benefits of driving for Uber. And now, retroactively, they want to change that bargain after the fact. So what is their case? What is their legal case that could justify this class action going forward?
Yeah, so one thing that's important to bear in mind with today's news is this is the very preliminary stage of this lawsuit. And really what's happened yesterday with the federal judge granted class certification to a select number of Uber drivers in California, but did not really yet weigh on whether or not the merits of the case will, what will happen in the outcome, whether or not Uber drivers will eventually be determined to be employees or independent contractors. Basically, what this U.S. Northern District Judge Chen allowed to go forward is several thousand Uber drivers now can become part of this class action to become part of this lawsuit. The lawyer that's representing them now has her work cut out for her because now she's going to have to, as you say, kind of make the very difficult case that people who have signed up to work for Uber as independent contractors, in fact, were being controlled by Ubers in various ways, that their job looked more like an employer-employee relationship than an independent contractor relationship. It's a very difficult thing to prove. But it's, not without precedent. There have been other cases and other companies that have proven that people who signed up to work as independent contractors were, in fact, being more kind of treated as employees.
So, Doug, it's obviously very early to even think about what may or may not happen here, but $51 billion is not chump change. Plus, this could totally disrupt Uber's core line of business. What happens if they win in a worst case or best case if you're the drivers? What happens here? I mean, what are the impacts to Uber? What happens to their entire business model?
Yeah, I want to clarify one thing in Mike's intro. The $51 billion is actually how much Uber is worth right now. It's been valued by private investors. That's not what anyone is seeking. And in fact, we don't know how much potentially, the monetary damages could result in this case. But like you said, there are very potentially high financial stakes here. Uber has really gotten that valuation and attracted so many investors and gains, so much momentum in its business because it bills itself as this technology platform. Instead of being a taxi company where it owns the cars and it employs the drivers and all of the costs that entails, Uber essentially, bills itself as just kind of a matchmaker between a passenger and a driver. And that has allowed it to kind of keep its costs very low and expand very rapidly to dozens of cities around the world. If Uber is going to have to eventually reclassify, if this case wins and Uber eventually has to reclassify some or all of its drivers as employees, it may have to incur new costs such as paying for their health insurance, paying workers' compensation, paying for their work expenses like gasoline and tolls and car repairs. So there are kind of a bevy of new costs that Uber would be saddled with that, would potentially definitely change Uber's business model. We don't know how that would look in the end. Potentially, people have said that Uber would potentially pass that cost back on to its customers. So, those low price rides that you enjoy around town that cost, $10 may eventually cost, $15 or more because Uber is going to have to be an more expensive business model. That's if kind of this case comes to bear.
Now, there was another case in California that reclassified a single employee as a single Uber driver as an employee. So they essentially got the status that this class action is seeking, theoretically. What happened in that case, and how does that bear on the class action?
Yeah, so that was, as you said, a single driver. And really what that rested on was the plaintiff proving that Uber controls so many different aspects of a driver's experience, from setting the fares, from various expectations around what kind of car they can drive, and how they interact with the app and how they even interact with customers, that the totality of the many different ways Uber controls its drivers really is proof in and of itself that that is an employer-employee relationship and not an independent contract relationship. So while the outcome of that particular case was not officially a precedent-setting case, as you say, it only pertained to one driver, I think that, part of the framework or the kind of the gist of how that case was won and how it was proven might provide kind of a backbone or a framework by which the plaintiff in this new class action suit could try to make her case. Basically, she's going to prove that the totality of the experience around a driver's, whole experience of getting in the car, picking up their passengers, and paying Uber and working out the price of the ride with Uber could potentially amount to an employer-employee relationship.
Doug, one thing that would change this this whole scenario is something that I think Uber is looking into. Back in February, it was reported that they were working in a Pittsburgh lab with Carnegie Mellon about self-driving cars, their own self-driving cars. Do you think that's the answer for them? That's their long-term strategy and the reason they're trying to do the whole self-driving car thing?
I think that is more at this point a hedge than anything. As the self-driving car story has become a very fascinating one for our readers and your viewers, I'm sure. And I think there's a lot of interesting companies kind of approaching that. But I don't think that anyone thinks that there are going to be self-driving cars on the road, in the very near future, and certainly not soon enough for Uber to start planning any significant changes to its business model.
Okay, just to interrupt you there, Doug, how does the timeline of self-driving cars match up with the timeline of a class action lawsuit like this, assuming it goes to the Supreme Court?
I've heard people estimating that this class action case could take years. I don't think, and I've heard basically people estimating that self-driving cars could take decades. So I think probably the class action thing is likely to be settled before that, but that's an interesting question to think about.